Welcome to Storm Tracker, your eye on the storm of your Carolina Hurricanes, and your home for the best insight and analysis to keep you totally informed on what's happening with the Canes. Whether it's the latest news on the ice or off the ice, we've got you covered. Now let's begin. Here's your host, Tom Ray.
So the Chicago Wolves got off to a bit of a slow start this year, but found their way and got hot as they headed into December. Unfortunately, at the end of the month and going into January, not quite the same story, and they lost 4 games in a row and scored 20-9. The good news is they bounced back last night for a big 7-3 win, and then to talk about the Chicago Wolves, our insider, of course, Andrew Rinaldi. How are you, man?
Doing great, Tom. Thanks for having me on again.
Well, listen, wanted to talk a little bit about what we're seeing with the Wolves these days. You know, it's kind of like the Hurricanes. It's you're not quite sure what you're going to see. For a good period there, of course, the Wolves were really playing great hockey. They had their full lineup. Then they had a few guys that left, headed off to the World Junior Tournament. So that wasn't the greatest thing. And, of course, Juha Jaska, who was playing so very well for them, headed up into Carolina, and of course Yost had previously gone. So a lot of different situations for the Wolves. What do you see?
I'm seeing a team that's still kind of trying to figure out exactly. You know, I feel like the after that early year slide, that they were starting to really fire on all cylinders. And then you had, Jost called up, Jaska called up. The goaltending situation has been very fluid. You had Tokarski was doing great, and he gets called up. Spencer Martin coming back really does kind of levels that out, but it's still, it's that never-ending blender, but that's the nature of the AHL, and unfortunately, none of your opponents are really going to feel sorry for you because they're all dealing with it too. And so, I think you're seeing a team that's still kind of like still figuring it out. I mean, just because they went on a real hot streak there in November and December, that's not always going to be the case. You're going to have your ups and your downs, and I think they went through kind of a down stretch over the last couple of weeks, as we've seen here.
Yes.
And while I don't think it's necessarily indicative of the team's talent or play style or anything like that, I think there's still things that just need to be figured out with this squad.
Well, and it's interesting, taking a look at those games, again, I mentioned they were outscored 20-9. And unfortunately, in 3 of those games, Ruslan Kazheyhev was between the pipes, and that's kind of tough for him. He's still finding his way in the AHL, and I'm sure Stan Dubicki's got lots of work left to do with Kazheyhev, but that was kind of tough on him. And I know the team struggled a little bit generally, and there were some players out and trying to find get their mojo back. And it looks like last night they certainly had some great success with that. But one of the guys that they missed, of course, I just mentioned a minute ago, was Bradly Nadeau. And Bradly seems to have come back. He had a very strong tournament, of course, for Team Canada. He seems to have come back very strong, and he got a couple of goals last night as well.
Yeah, I had a good conversation with him after he came back from the junior tournament, which, I'm sure was a huge disappointment when you're playing in the nation's capital, and it wasn't the way that I wanted to go for Canada. But seeing Bradly in such a huge role there for the team in such a big tournament, I think it kind of it's hard to say. That's every Canadian's dream, right? To wear that maple leaf on their jersey and to play in that tournament like that, especially in front of their hometown fans. So He came back from that and really didn't look like he missed a beat at all. And scored in his return back from the tournament, and like I said, had a couple of goals last night, and he's got 5 goals since coming back from the World Junior Tournament.
Wow.
So Yeah, he I asked him like if there's any difference. He played in college, then he's in the American League, and now he's playing against the junior players. It's 20 and under, and it's all different play styles everywhere he goes. Does he change his game at all or anything like that? And while you have to be adaptive to a certain point, it's going to be a faster game, a little more transition in juniors, right, where there's not as much of a defensive structure. Bradly just said he kind of leans on his game and what got him to this level. And I think that's exactly what you need to do for success, is to just, you've gotten this far by being the player that you are. And there's no need to change it up, whether you're going to play for Canada or you're going to play for the Chicago Wolves. And he's didn't miss, like I said, he hasn't missed a beat since he's come back from that tournament. And, maybe not getting a medal might just kind of push him a little further to, take it out and on the opponents in the American League. So wasn't good for Bakersfield last night, I can tell you that.
Well, the couple of interesting things I've noticed, of course, he's back with Ryan Suzuki, and those guys, they tend to have a lot of magic together, as you've mentioned previously too, Andrew. And I think the other thing with him is he's getting a chance to get that shot off. I've noticed a number of his goals have been his classic, one-timer, and that's really his trademark, as we both know. One of the things that the hockey forecaster in their scouting report on Bradly said was that he can play any position up front and oozes offensive flair and acumen. And he definitely does. And there's no question that when he's on the ice, things are happening. And it's great to see him back and of course, firing on all cylinders. Now, I did mention that one of the guys that did leave was on the line with those two guys, with Suzuki and of course, with Nadeau, and that's Juha Jaska. And, Jaska's kind of had some fun with the Hurricanes. He's been so a lot of folks have really appreciated his work. What are you thinking about Jaska these days?
I wish we had him back in Chicago. But, I feel like, early on in the season, I wasn't really sure like what kind of player they were getting in Jaska. And really quick, we got a taste of just, the kind of 200-foot game, responsible player. I think a lot of times people hear that and they think like, oh, okay, so this guy can play pretty good defensively, but he doesn't really chip in a whole lot offensively. But I tend to disagree with that. I think Jaska, just the way that he processes and sees the game, he's just a step ahead of some of the younger players here, amidst that pro experience that he's had in Europe all this time. For sure. He just knows where to be, whether he has the puck, whether he's about to get the puck, or whether he's defending the puck. He, I identified almost immediately as like, okay, I see what Eric Tulsky and Rod and everyone brought in a guy like him for down in Chicago, and he played so well that now he's been able to progress up there and have his cup of coffee with the Hurricanes. And I mean, okay, selfishly, I want him back in Chicago, but I would absolutely love it for him if he were to, stay up and remain with the Hurricanes. I guess we'll just have to wait and see. But I think now the fans in Carolina are starting to understand why he caught fire with a lot of the fans down here in Chicago really quickly.
Well, yeah, and he is that prototypical Rod Brindamore type player, as you mentioned. He works both ends of the rink. You can see him on the ice. He's making things happen. I think one of the things that I've noticed since he's been with the Hurricanes, he can motor. He's an excellent skater. He can get up the ice quickly, and he's seldom caught out of position. So I think he's a guy that I hope he stays with the Canes because I think he's adding a lot to the mix. Just the way he plays the game, just his personality, his style. He's just a guy that you want to have in your hockey club. And I know there was a lot of discussion on the broadcasts about the personality of Juha Jaska. So, and good on him. 26 years old, he comes over trying to make his way into the NHL. That's a tough slug, and he's been up there and certainly not looking out of place for sure. So, yeah, we'll see how Juha goes for a while. I expect he'll be back in Chicago. We'll talk about him later this year. But for the time being, we'll enjoy him very much with the Hurricanes. Another guy that just continues to amaze me. He played in Norfolk last year, found his way into the roster this year, and is just flying. And that's, of course, Justin Robidas.
Yeah, he that month of January that he had and has been pretty remarkable. I mean, he had a 10-game point streak there for a while. Sprinkled in a 4-point performance and not a big deal. And, I think when, you're looking at some of the offensive leaders, you're expecting Suzuki, you're expecting Nadeau. I don't know if I kind of expected the production out of Robidas quite immediately like this, right. But I'm happily surprised by it. And, I know I've spoken about him on this podcast before, but I mean, still to this day, what you're getting out of him at each and every single night. And that kind of consistency is exactly what coaches and front office are looking for here down at this level. And just the motor that he's got running, whether it's 5-on-5, penalty kill, whatever, he doesn't care. He's going to be out there and he's going to be a menace for the other teams. And he has been so far. And it's been a lot of fun watching him and stack the points up. And, the point streak's been broken since then, but I don't think it's going to take him long to start another one pretty soon here.
Well, and with with some of the players, being out for a period of time, it gave him a chance to kind of move up into some other roles. And he's been doing it all. He's been on the power play. He's been killing penalties, of course, taking some serious draws. He's a guy that, again, smaller player has to excel in other ways. Mm-hmm. And I think he's demonstrating a really strong offensive capability. I mean, it's actually surprised me, but he can really fire the puck, and he's definitely got a nose for the net. So exciting to see how he's going to develop. Quick thing on what was said about him in McKean's tenacious and stocky pivot is what they called Justin Robidas, and that's exactly what he is. And the thing, I think a key point about that is he is a stocky player. He's very strong on his on his skates, and he's a guy that doesn't get knocked off the puck easily. So he's not like a little guy going in the corner and he just gets tapped and he's done. He's right in there and he can hold his own. And I think that's going to be critical for him as he tries to find his way and move up the ranks. But I think he's really making a case for himself to be in that group of future center prospects for the Hurricanes. And as you know, Andrew, that's been a concern for the Hurricanes. Not a lot of depth there, not a lot of young players coming along. And this guy, and maybe there's another one that's not far behind him in Justin Poirier that, again, smaller centerman, but these guys have great skills. And it's great to see Robidas continue his fine development in Chicago. I think it's great. And he paid his dues in Norfolk last year. So the right way to do it for sure. Now, the next guy, and I wanted to mention this because, as we've watched what's been going on with the Wolves, some very unlikely suspects have kind of shown up, and players that folks won't know anything about weren't really in the farm system of the Hurricanes, and were signed by the Wolves kind of quietly. A couple of those guys, Nick Swaney, he had 4 points last night. That's not bad. Former draft pick of the Wild. Also, this guy, Danny Katic, who was not drafted, but a big player who played in Norfolk last year. He's 6'5" and 220, and I know he had 3 or 4 points last night. These guys are kind of filling in and doing their job. But the guy that's really been flying has been Nikita Pavlichev. And why don't you tell us about Nikita?
Yeah, you want to talk about a big body. I mean, at 6'7", when they stack this guy out in front of the net on the power play, he's just an absolute redwood. And you're starting to see how he's accruing all of these power play goals all of a sudden, and especially when you have a lot of your guys like Yaska, who you relied on so heavily on the man advantage. Now you have to kind of change your unit up a bit. But Pavlichev has absolutely taken the most of the opportunities, and it helps when you got guys like Scott Morrow firing the puck right at you.
Yes.
And then it just kind of when you're in the right position, when you got the guy setting up the puck the right way, and and he's when you're that big and you can't get knocked out in front of the net, that's how they're creating these goals in the power play. Goaltenders can't see through the screen, can't anticipate the deflections, and he's piling up the goals. He's piling up. I think he's got 6 points in his last 5 games.
He does. Yes.
Between him and Swaney, Katic, Sahil Panwar is coming in.
Martel, all those guys, yeah.
Jordan Martel. This is the nature. Like I said, the nature of the league is that you get these guys that play well and they're relied upon, and then the NHL team has need of them. Like I said, no one in this league is going to feel sorry for you because everyone's dealing with it. So you're going to have to find guys to step up and contribute in one sense or the other. And these guys, usually you're relying on them more to kind of grind it out in the corners and provide some energy. But now they're putting up the points, and exactly. that's helped kind of break the Wolves out of their slump a bit with that big 7 spot against Bakersfield. Puck drop is actually going to start about 6 minutes from now for that second set in the recording, but I'll keep an eye on it as it's happening. It's like I said, it doesn't. No one's gonna cry and write poems for the Chicago Wolves on having some of their players called up because everyone's dealing with it. So Pavlichev, he's been awesome.
No, and Pavylchev, I was just going to mention, he's kind of interesting. He was drafted in 2015 by the Penguins in the 7th round. And again, he went to Penn State. This is interesting. A guy from Russia, he went to Penn State, kind of did what you need to do to try to get your position in North America and try to get into the pro ranks. And he's paid his dues. He's been in the ECHL for several years on and off. So he's a guy that, finally getting a chance to do something with the Wolves. I mean, earlier in the year, the center, the spot was pretty full, but he's now been able to find a spot and move up. And he's finding himself, as you say, on the power play. He's finding himself getting more minutes, and he's really taking advantage of it. And he's a guy that you never know with these guys. Sometimes later in life, they can really start to show something. And he seems to move well on the ice. He handles himself quite well from what I've seen watching him. And again, he's been red hot, as you've said, 6 points his last 5 games. So he's definitely earning his keep with the Wolves these days. So great to see Pavlichev, and we'll keep an eye on him. Definitely a guy that when you watch the Wolves, you can't miss Nikita. That's for sure. Okay, so the forward side seems to be in pretty good shape. As I mentioned, you've got some of the big guns back. Unger Soren seems to be playing quite well. You've got Nadeau going. You've always had Suzuki. He's been playing outstanding. So lots of good stuff there. The defense, a little bit surprising to me recently with these games where they had all these goals scored. That defense is loaded, as you know. They've got, even with, the professional guys that they've got, Smith is now with Chicago, of course, and you've got, Joakim Ryan down there. Stillman has been going back and forth, so Riley's been up and down. And, of course, you've got the great youngsters. But one guy that I did want to talk about, who we haven't talked much about this year, is Alexei Heimosalmi. Now, Heimosalmi, when I've watched him in the Prospect Showcase tournaments the last couple of years, he has really, really impressed me. And something about Heimosalmi is that, when he was playing in Finland junior hockey, he was really outstanding for them. He was, I read many articles about how well he had played in those tournaments. He was a real leader from the back line, and again, a player that been pushed to the side a little bit because of other players that have jumped up, and he's had to impress and move up the lineup. What are you seeing with Heimosalmi these days?
I feel like over the last month, Heimosalmi's game has really kind of taken a step forward. I feel like whereas earlier in the season, he might have been a little more, I don't want to say tentative with the puck, but I can't really think of a better adjective at this point. It just, it's just that it's his first year in the American League. It's, there's certainly an adjustment period and all that. And over that last month, you're starting to see, him settling in, the comfort, the confidence, and his game's really kind of starting to blossom there as a result. I really love the way that he skates with the puck, and it just, when you tackle that in with guys like Morrow and Fensore, it just, when you have one of those guys in each one of your defensive lines, it changes up the way that teams defend against you. It changes up the way that teams game plan for you. And, it's not quite so easy to just dump in and chase and get after them because you got a couple of lead foots back there. It's like, no, they're going to grab the puck and they're going to take it and transition the other way before you even realize what's going on. So it's in seeing him kind of grow more into that game. I think we understood more of what we were getting in Morrow and Fensore, and we knew what Heimosalmi had, and maybe we just needed to see it with more consistency. And I think you're starting to really see that over the last month. His game has really impressed me.
Well, one of the benefits for all of these guys is that you do have the veterans, and I think those guys are great mentors, to team up with the younger players. Here's what McKean said about Heimosalmi. There's never been any doubt that Heimosalmi is a highly skilled defenseman. His talents as a skater are superb, and so is his ability to control and make moves with the puck while flying around the ice at the highest gear. The difficulty, however, has involved him figuring out how to actually make the most out of his given gifts. So the question has been never the talent. I mean, we've seen it. He can skate like mad. He's great offensively. He's not a big player, but he handles himself very well. But the key for him is putting it all together. And I think that's, as you mentioned, he's starting to find his way in the American League. He's starting to do the kinds of things he can do. And, when you think about Heimosalmi, again, right-hand shot, he fits in. You've got, of course, Morrow, who's a right-hand shot. You've got Legault, who's a right-hand shot. You've got some pretty good, darn good defensemen on the right side down there. So, it's great to see these guys starting to really show what they can do.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, it's that dynamic when you can throw any one of those guys on any lineup. It's not like, okay, here's kind of the heavy set defensive line, and then you got more of a puck. Like when you're able to just fill them in, you got 60 minutes of solid puck movers behind and that blue line. It changes the dynamic of how, like I said, not just how your team plays, but how the other team plays against you. So I think, we're halfway through the season now at this point. There's even more runway for these guys to grow into their game. And I think you're going to start seeing that dynamic fold of how their play style really start to show out more, I think, in this second half.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned that. One of the things I noticed is that they have been exactly the same at home as they have on the road, 9-7-1. That's kind of interesting. And I think, you look at this team, they're built to go, I think, this year. They've got, they're going to have the great goaltending, depending on which of the veterans is there. They'll have a solid goaltender lead for sure. They've got all kinds of depth on the blue line, and the youngsters are continuing to grow. And then up front, again, they got size. They got the guys like, Josiah Slavin and Skylar Brindamore, the kind of guys that get in there and can push and shove and do whatever needs to get done. Like the Stahl line in Carolina. And then you've got some guys that can really put the puck in the net. You've got, you got Ungersorm, you've got Nadeau, you've got Ryan Suzuki, even Gleb Trikazov if he starts to pick things up as well. So a lot of talent down there. I think it's exciting. I'm really excited to see them. And, of course, they're continuing to grow with Cam Abbott and the job he's doing and his crew to bring these guys along. And I think it's, I'm particularly am pleased with what I'm seeing with the Wolves so far. And one of the interesting things, and I wanted to bring it up because I thought you might have some thoughts on this too, Andrew. As we get towards the trade deadline, there's been a lot of conjecture that the Canes may be doing some things. And, of course, the asset that they have more than a lot of teams is a ton of prospects. Like you look at some of these prospects they have in Chicago, they're not going to be able to bring all these players up. But it's just not happening. They're not all going to be Carolina Hurricanes. We know that. And there are some really talented youngsters that I'm sure other teams are thinking, man, can I get my fingers on a Dominic Fensori or, Charles Alexis Legault or, Felix Ungersorm or whoever. What do you think about that? Do you hear anything around the team, or are there any thoughts that, hey, you might see some players moving at some point?
That's the reality of the business in this league. Last year it was Vasily Ponomarev, who was a player over a couple of seasons that I really enjoyed watching in Chicago. Yeah. And one who really enjoyed being in Chicago, I think he was pretty heartbroken about having to go over to Wilkes-Barre and to Pittsburgh. But
that's right, the Pittsburgh team.
But it's something that's always going to be floated out there. You go to every American League game, there's going to be scouts from, say like Edmonton was in town. And I'm like, oh man, I'm wondering like, what's Edmonton? And they're just out there kind of doing their duty and just kind of taking a look and seeing what they're and reporting back to their teams, what these players look like. So whether it's going to happen, it does seem likely, right? Because the Hurricanes do have an abundance of young talent, and right, the reality of it is that not all of them are going to be Hurricanes at the end of the day. So maybe they strap some of these young players in a deal for a forward like Ponomarev was last year, But I can't lock in like this is looking at this guy or that guy.
No, of course.
It's all well,
none of us can.
but like I said, it's as you get up to the trade deadline, it's oh man, I just as a Griffins beat reporter, just seeing on Twitter of Jonathan Berggren and Steve Yzerman trending at the same time, like 30 minutes before the trade deadline, really elevated my blood pressure. And that's just being here in the American League. That's just like I said, that's just the reality of the business. You have these guys that, they're fighting for a chance to claw into the NHL, and sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's not with your parent club. It's going to be somewhere else, but the opportunities are always going to be there. So it's just, like I said, it's just the reality of it.
Well, and I think one of the areas that the Canes are particularly rich, as we discussed, has been defense. And, they've got big Alexander Nikishin heading over late this year, and he'll be ready for next year. And you've got Slavin on a long-term deal. You've got several other players locked up. I'm sure they'll want to keep Chatfield, and they've got already they have Gostisbehere and Walker signed to long-term deals. So, again, not a lot of spots on that blue line. You'd have to think that Scott Morrow's the most likely to make a move to the Hurricanes. But if you recall all the discussion on Elias Pettersson with Vancouver was around a deal that would include, among others, Scott Morrow, and, of course, Martin Necas. So, again, you've got situations that are going to come up, and depending on what is available, the Canes may move a player of some significance because they're in a position where, they've got extras. They've got other folks that can come in and get the job done for them. So it's exciting. And so we'll follow that as well. And anything that you're hearing rumor mill-wise, we'll be very interested to hear in the back halls as to, hey, this guy thinks he might be going or something. Wanted to kind of just wrap up with throwing it out to you of anything else you wanted to chat about or anything else you thought we should know today. I know that this team kind of hit a bump in the road over the last couple of weeks, but that's exactly what we're here for in the American League. Is these young players are going to hit, stumbles in their development and their game, and you're here to kind of work through that and to learn from that and
then you throw up, you're struggling for a bit. You seem like you can't get the puck out of your net, and then you throw a 7 spot in on a team that's coming from across the country, and it's anything can happen really. And that's, it's part of the fun of covering this league and seeing these guys continue to grow and fight through a lot of this adversity that's thrown in their face. It's not just the players, it's the coaching staff that's getting settled in their first year here in Chicago. So lot of hockey, a lot of runway there, a lot of hockey that's still left to play. This team still, their destiny still in their own hands, I believe. But in terms of points percentage wise, they are third in the Central, although it's not a guarantee that they would end up in third. They are on pace to finish higher than Milwaukee, which would be awesome. Milwaukee did just pick up Chase DeLeo from waivers coming in from Europe, who is a veteran in the AHL, big point producer. So that's going to just throw another wrench in the problem there in the division, because why not? And but this is a young team. It's an exciting team. They're still I still feel like even when they might not have their best game on some nights, they're still in it just about every single evening. And that's all you can ask for from your young players, is to just give your all every chance, every game. And I'm excited to see what happens in this second half, because I feel like there's a lot of talent. Once they kind of start putting it all together consistently, it can be a very dangerous team.
Yeah, and we talked about that earlier this year too, Andrew. The Canes did load up with their top prospects down there. So you've got a group of players that are just going to continue to grow, and they're continuing to learn the Canes system. They're getting more comfortable, and that's something else that I think is worth mentioning as we wrap up, is that the ability for these players, and it was Tyson Jost, and then of course it was Juha Jaska and those guys coming up, and certainly Ty Smith to some extent as well. They are being schooled on the Canes system quite nicely by Cam Abbott and his team, his coaching staff. And I think, again, that's critical for the Canes. We didn't even have that last year. So this is a whole new opportunity, I think, for both teams. And I think it's been going well so far.
Yeah, it's I like I said before, W's a cure anything that's going on off the ice, and this team is starting to pile the W's in. Even with the 4-game losing streak, they're still right there in the thick of the division race. So it's I feel like once you kind of got some of the egos out of the way, it was understood kind of how this relationship would benefit both sides. And and seeing Chicago be more competitive on the ice, seeing Carolina's young players in a more stable situation where they can kind of grow into their roles, hopefully into contributors for Carolina. And you're starting to see the fruits of that even just a few months into the renewed relationship. So I'm glad that we've kind of put some of that nastiness of the offseason behind us now at this point, and it's all about what's going on the ice and I myself, Chicago's fans, and I think a lot of Carolina's upper management are all enjoying what they're seeing on the ice right now.
Cool. Well, listen, Andrew, as always, it's great fun. Where can folks see you, and where can they connect with you?
Absolutely. So I write for the Calder Times, where we cover all sorts of AHL hockey action. You can find my written work there. I also live tweet during most Wolves games at Andrew_Rinaldi_. And like I said, I tweet during the games. I give updates on the teams, and I just enjoy talking with fans. So if anyone's got any questions or banter or wants to tell me that my opinion's wrong or anything, I'm happy to engage with just about everyone. So if anyone wants to challenge me to a wits of hockey, then you can find me there.
Of course, and that's great. And I know your knowledge of the Wolves and some other teams in the American Hockey League is outstanding. So, as always, really appreciate you joining, Andrew. It's great fun to talk about the Wolves, and we'll be picking it up, of course, next month again. For those of you who have been watching or listening, thanks for joining us. Andrew and I are very pleased that you could spend the time with us. If you like this episode, please press the like button. If you have any comments or questions, please put those in the space down below. Andrew and I will try to get back to you just as quickly as possible. And of course, if you want to be alerted of future episodes of Storm Tracker and of course the Chicago Wolves Report, please hit the subscribe button and the bell, and you'll be alerted of any episode that comes up in the future. As always, Andrew and I would like to thank you very much for spending the time with us, and we'll catch up with you real soon right here on Storm Tracker.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to like, subscribe, and tell your friends for everything with the Canes you need. Storm Tracker.